The word artifact is defined as an object made by human beings that possesses cultural or historical value. I'm Leah.
I'm Phil.
And I'm Steve. Today we're going to explore some of those remarkable items that link us to our past.
If you have an appetite for the strange and bizarre, then pull up a chair and grab a spoon for another intriguing serving of Remnant Stew. Remnant Stew is gluten-free, organic, made from all natural, free-range ingredients, and guaranteed to provide the recommended daily serving of curiosity.
The definition that Leah read above came from Google Dictionary. Again, the word artifact is defined as an object made by human being, typically an item of cultural or historic interest. Wikipedia further clarifies a cultural artifact as a term used in the social sciences, particularly anthropology, for anything created by humans, which gives information about the culture of its creator and its users. Artifacts provide an unbroken line from the past to the present. I first became acquainted with artifacts through my Uncle Richard Goss. He was my mother's younger brother. Uncle Richard was one of my favorite people. He was 6'4" and a United States Marine during World War II. He had some great stories to tell.
I bet he did.
In fact, he was one of the few survivors of the Battle of Guam in the Pacific Ocean. But in spite of his war experience, he was one of the funniest people I have ever met, and he had a tremendous sense of humor, and he was a terrific storyteller. Most of what I know about humor and storytelling, I learned from Uncle Richard and my other uncles as well. My uncles were all together. It was quite a time.
I bet.
But back to our topic of artifacts, Uncle Richard had really keen eyesight. Eagle eye, almost, we would say. And he was always finding arrowheads. In his home, he had created a framed display of dozens of arrowheads, like from the largest to smaller, just kind of in a row, and they made a little pattern. That's the way he had them displayed. Varying sizes that he had found. He lived in the historic city of San Antonio, Texas, and he actually worked for the city of San Antonio doing maintenance on utility infrastructure.
Oh, okay.
In this work, he was often on sites where digging was occurring, and frequently he would look down into freshly dug soil and spot arrowheads pointing out.
Right.
I could walk with him along riverbanks and in the hills, and suddenly he would bend down and pick up an arrowhead that I had just walked past. He just had an eye for them. Looking at his arrowheads made me aware of the time and precision that the early Native Americans had taken to sharpen and shape each one out of the native rock. In my mind's eye, I could see them sitting next to a rocky bank and carefully using primitive tools to create the hunting instruments that their lives depended on. It was then that I learned that artifacts link us to people from the past. Mm-hmm. Today I brought in an artifact just so that we could kind of get in the mood for it. It was a ration book that was my grandmother's to use during World War II. When I was teaching, I used to like to bring it into my classroom and let my students touch it. I think there's something really special about getting to touch things from the past. Museums kind of frown on you doing that. A few years ago, somebody brought to the Greater Cut and Shoot area the original design of the Texas flag made by the gentleman who designed it.
Charles Billinger Stewart.
Yeah,
That's
Mr.
right.
Stewart. And so I actually got to hold that, so that was kind of cool.
That's impressive.
But I think when I think about the things that I've actually gotten to touch, last September when we were in Amsterdam and toured the Anne Frank house, and they take you through, they were staying in rooms in the top of the back of this warehouse, and they had it covered with a bookcase that would slide out.
Right.
And now they have the bookcase covered with plexiglass, but in the very back of it, there's a little hole. And yes, I reached my finger through the hole and touched the actual bookcase. And of course, if you think about the handrails are still the same and, as you're going up the stairs that were there then. And so, it sounds like we're getting some rain outside. That's all right. We'll press right along. If you hear a little extra noise, then that's probably because of the rain.
We're having a downpour.
So anyway, artifacts are really what we're dealing in today. Now, of course, arrowheads are nice and all, but we know what our listeners really like. What about some weird artifacts, you ask? Well, we're happy to oblige, and there is no shortage of odd artifacts to pick from. We may come back and revisit this topic again later.
Yeah, it's funny because, we have listeners overseas, and when we talk about artifacts here, the arrowheads go back.
Right.
I mean, they go back to the Indians and or Native Americans.
Right, several hundred years perhaps even.
But, and I do the ghost tour, which is really a historic tour in Montgomery, which is where Charles Billinger Stewart lived and is buried. And while I'm doing that, I give the history of the town, and I'm struck by the fact that it really wasn't that long ago. It was like,
less than 200 years.
Yeah. and so 3, 4, maybe 5 generations.
Yeah.
And then you have the Native Americans, which, goes way back.
But longer.
But I would love, and I have never gone to Europe. I would love to go over to Europe and see some of their artifacts and their history.
Quite impressive.
Right. So, our first odd artifact comes to us from Bavaria, specifically inside Munich's Frauenkirche. Is that how you think it's pronounced?
Yeah, I think Frauenkirche, yeah.
And I recognize that Kirk, which means church.
Yeah. Ooh, thunder.
Or that's translated as Church of Our Lady.
Right.
According to Atlas Obscura, one of our favorite websites,
right.
Amazing.
And also historydaily.org, the architect of the Frauenkirche may have made a deal with the devil.
Uh-oh.
At least that's the legend.
Come with a violin or?
I don't know.
Wait a minute.
Yes.
It would be
a fiddle, yeah.
This is Bavaria, not...
That's why I said violin, not fiddle.
No, we're not in Georgia, I'm sorry.
Right.
Okay, bring it back in. Yeah. While many Gothic churches in Europe are noted for their over-the-top ornateness and design, the Frauenkirche is notably plain by comparison. According to the local legend, the reason for this is that in 1468, the church architect, Jorg von Hausbach, was running short of funds to complete his project. And so then along came the devil, one day with an offer. I'll supply the funds, quote, this is quoting the devil, I'll supply the funds to finish the building on one condition. You can't put any windows in it. I want it to be a monument to darkness. Hausbach agreed to the terms. Yes, agreed to the terms.
Can it have a door?
Well,
guess you got to have a door to get in it.
But Hausbach agreed to the terms, according to the legend, but had a trick up his sleeve.
Yeah.
20 years went by before the devil got around to checking on the completed project.
I guess he was busy.
He was busy.
Things to do.
Other deals.
Yeah.
Hausbach walked him into the entry from which no windows were visible. See? No windows. Okay, let's go. The devil said, wait a minute, where's all that light coming from? Taking a few steps down the aisle, the devil saw that there were, in fact, windows. That when you first walk in, had been obscured by pillars supporting the ceiling.
Oh, so when you couldn't see the windows because you just see the pillars in the aisle.
And so, curses, foiled again, says the devil.
Yeah, he was having a bad day, wasn't he?
And with that,
I think he has a bad day every day.
I think so. But with that, he lifted up his foot and stomped on the tile so hard that it left an imprint of his foot on the floor. Yeah. And today, the devil's footprint can still be seen on the floor of Munich's Frauenkirche. Or maybe not. I mean, there is definitely a footprint there.
Yeah, okay.
It's like something.
Yeah, something left a footprint there.
There's a large black footprint embedded into a tile on the floor of the church. There's a few problems with this story, though.
You think?
Only a few.
That's all right. It's still a good story. We like it.
That's right. And they still tell it. The tour guides still tell it. Mm-hmm. First of all, though, there's actually a huge window at the very front of the church. And so unless the devil was really nearsighted, he could easily have seen it from the front. The window was mostly covered with a large decorative altar between 1620 and 1858. So maybe that's where the legend had begun.
Oh, yeah. Probably somebody thought it up during that time.
Yeah, they're sitting in church thinking this stuff up. But also the large...
yeah, they didn't have, Netflix.
Or their phone to scroll through. Right, yeah. But the large footprint, and there is a footprint there, and we'll have a picture of it on Facebook. The large footprint is embedded in a tile that doesn't match any of the other tiles in the floor.
Yeah.
It's like a yellow or a gold color while the rest of the tiles are red and gray.
Right.
Plus, the print appears to, it looks like a human foot. Or not a footprint, but like a boot print.
Yeah, somebody's boot. Yeah.
Right. Rather than a cloven hoof.
Cloven hoof.
Oh, come on. That's what the devil's footprints look like.
Yeah, we would recognize it.
Yeah. So exactly who left the print and how it was made is unknown, but that doesn't stop tour guides from just
overselling it,
pointing the print and telling the legend. It's a legend. It's a legend. It's a story.
Yeah, and the tourists want to go match their foot up with the print. There's several pictures online of people sticking their foot right into it.
But it's really odd that they would have continued to have this tile with a footprint in it.
Yeah.
Well, why not? I mean, it gets you there to take a tour.
And it's in a church, so it's got to be the devil's footprint.
Oh, yeah, sir. He was mad. He thought he was going to get his own little tomb there. His own little
tomb would be right.
His own little tomb. Yeah, his own little place of dedicated to him.
Of darkness.
Didn't work out that.
Just darkness.
Yeah. Well, how would you like to visit a town in which everything is an artifact? Now, you might be thinking I'm talking about Pompeii, and that certainly is an interesting place.
Yeah.
But I think we have covered Pompeii in an earlier episode.
What, do you think we buried that one?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's well, we'll save that for another time. Anyway, the town I'm referring to is actually in the American Southwest in the state of New Mexico.
I've been through there.
Yes, New Mexico is a state in the United States. Even some Americans are unaware of this. You remember back in 1996 when the Olympic Games were in Atlanta, there were some people from New Mexico that called trying to get tickets, and they were told, no, you'll have to go to your own country to get tickets.
Oh.
People in Atlanta didn't realize that New Mexico was part of the United States.
They do take American cash.
Yes, they do.
Oh my goodness! There's and New Mexico is a play on the fact that Mexico is old Mexico.
Right, old Mexico.
Old Mexico.
Right.
It's
and
the
New
OG
Mexico.
Mexico.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, gee.
So the state of New Mexico entered the United States as the 47th state in 1912. It is the 5th largest state in area, but only the 36th largest in population.
Yep.
The state contains vast expanses of desert lands and rugged mountains, which help to explain its relatively sparse population. Mm-hmm. In southeastern New Mexico, neatly tucked between the Capitan and Sacramento Mountains, you'll find the historic town of Lincoln. Originally called La Placida del Rio Bonito, or the place by the Pretty River, the name was changed to Lincoln in 1869 to honor the slain American president. The town became famous, or perhaps infamous would be a better term, during what became known as the Lincoln County War, which took place primarily during a week in 1878, but with after effects lasting all the way up until 1881.
Oh, wow.
I was fortunate to get to visit this town in May of 2023. According to a website called nmhistoricscites.org/Lincoln, in 1873, an Irishman named L.G. Murphy and his partner James Dolan established a store in Lincoln. This establishment soon became known as The House because of its monopoly over commerce in the region. 3 years later, in 1876, a wealthy young Englishman named John Tunstall arrived in Lincoln and opened a rival store and a bank. You know, the Irish and the English have been kind of fighting each other for years, and it played out here some 10,000 miles away from the original homelands. Tunstall was backed by several business partners, including the Texas cattle baron John Chisholm. You may have heard of the Chisholm Trail.
Yep.
Well, trouble soon emerged as Tunstall and company began challenging Murphy and Dolan over their lucrative beef contracts with the United States government. These contracts were for providing beef to soldiers at the nearby frontier Fort Stanton, as well as to some Native American reservations. Soon, two factions in the town developed between the Irish Catholic Murphy and the English Protestant John Tunstall.
See, now you're bringing religion into it.
Mm-hmm. They were fighting. That's part of the reason why England and Ireland have been at each other.
That's why they've been fighting for
big part of it.
10,000 miles away.
Well, both men hired gangs of gunslingers to fortify their position.
Of course.
One of John Tunstall's ranch hands was a young string bean of a fellow named William H. Bonney.
Uh-huh.
History will remember him as Billy the Kid. Yeah.
This is the Wild West.
Right.
This is it.
Here it comes.
Complicating the situation is that the territorial governor and the local sheriff were both supported by opposite factions. So one supported the governor, the other one supported the sheriff. And on February 18, 1878, John Tunstall was murdered in cold blood by members of the Murphy and Dolan gang as he was riding through the mountains near Lincoln. 3 weeks later, members of Tunstall supporters, known as the Regulators, hunted down several members of the Murphy-Dolan gang and killed 3 of them. Throughout the spring and early summer, the fighting continued sporadically between the 2 factions. Then, on July 15, 1878, the fighting came to the streets of the town of Lincoln. The 2 stores, located roughly 2 blocks away from each other on opposite sides of the only street in town, became fortifications. Over the next 5 days, the gunfight blazed away between the Dolan and Tunstall factions. The rest of the citizens fortified themselves in their homes. By the time the dust had been cleared, 23 men were killed and another 23 wounded.
Goodness.
President Rutherford B. Hayes declared Lincoln's main street to be the most dangerous street in America.
You know, when you say 23 dead and 23 wounded, that probably was almost every single man in town.
A big part of the town,
least,
yeah. It was a big part of the town for sure. Billy the Kid managed to escape the bloodbath that day, but 3 years later, he was captured by the new sheriff named Pat Garrett, and he was returned to Lincoln, where he was scheduled to be hanged. However, on April 28, 1881, he managed to escape, killing 2 deputies with their own guns in the process. A few months later, Pat Garrett finally caught up to Billy the Kid in Fort Sumner, New Mexico, and he shot him dead in his girlfriend's bed. Seems like a rough way to go anyway. Today, the town of Lincoln has been preserved and appears very much as it did in the 1880s. You feel like, other than the street being paved, all the buildings are pretty much unchanged from the 1880s. A $10 entrance fee will gain you access to the Murphy-Dolan store, the Tunstall store, the courthouse, where bullet holes from Billy the Kid's escape are still visible, and numerous other homes and buildings from the era, as well as a visitor center with numerous interpretive displays and a 22-minute video detailing the Lincoln County War and other local history. To me, the most impressive place, or the most interesting place, was the John Tunstall store. Somehow, this dry goods store maintained much of its merchandise from the late 1800s. The place is chock full of tools, tin plates and cups, various bottles of odd mixtures, rifles, and clothing from 140 years ago. And I think it was the clothing that intrigued me the most. Now, we tend to think of people in the American West wearing dark-covered, shirts and pants, but here there were several men's shirts that were of bold colors and even stripes and patterns. Now, the shirts didn't come with collars. Those were sold separately.
That's right.
But these particular artifacts gave me a different insight to the 19th century than I had before.
That was the dandy store.
Yeah, it must be.
If you were a dandy, that's where you went.
I guess so. But yeah, it was pretty impressive to see. Interesting to see. It was. I wasn't expecting that. Now, if you are a person who is interested in the American West of the 19th century, or if you know someone who is, then let me recommend that you include Lincoln, New Mexico,
for sure,
in your future travels. Oh, and by the way, your $10 ticket will also give you access to the nearby Fort Stanton historic site, which is another unique artifact. Fort Stanton was an outpost established in 1855 to protect American settlers from Apache raids. By the 1900s, it was repurposed as a hospital for tuberculosis patients. Then in the 1930s, it served as a Civil Conservation Corps, the CCC, camp, and then it was replaced during World War II as a German prisoner of war camp. In fact, there are pictures there that the German prisoners had actually built themselves a swimming pool and had diving competitions.
Listen, in New Mexico, a pool is kind of a necessity.
That's sure. Both sites are well worth the time and effort it takes to get to the remote location. Very interesting place, Lincoln, New Mexico.
Well, and I just have to say, we're having a thunderstorm, so if you hear lightning in the background, just,
What's that old song? Riders on a Storm. Bum-ba-da-dum-bum-bum.
So now we travel from New Mexico down south to Costa Rica, where we encounter some very strange round artifacts. Back in the 1930s, workers from the United Fruit Company were clearing land in and I'm going to call this Dequeese.
Okay, I think that's right. Maybe Dequeese or Dequeese.
No, I looked it up, and it was pronounced Dyquis, but that was the American
Yeah, well,
pronunciation.
it's a Spanish word.
Dequeese is Dequeese.
Dequeese or Dequeese. So
But Dequeese Valley, River Valley of Costa Rica, they were clearing land in the Dequeese Valley, River Valley of Costa Rica to make room for a new banana plantation.
Oh, I love bananas. Good. I like that.
Suddenly, a backhoe clanged into something very large and round. Workers with shovels began digging around the object and soon had uncovered a completely round stone. It was about 3 feet across and certainly did not look like it was a natural occurrence. When the sphere was lifted up out of the ground, it showed evidence of having been formed by humans, so it had tool marks on it.
Yeah.
This was a real head-scratcher, but, they had to keep on working. The United Fruit Company didn't come all the way to Central America to just look around rocks. Work had to continue, and so the next day, clang, another rock.
Wow.
This one was 4 feet in diameter.
That's getting bigger.
4 feet in diameter, 3 feet in diameter.
Yeah,
and
those are some really big.
Spherical.
Yeah, spherical rocks.
Yes,
yeah.
That's a huge cannonball.
That is, right? But on the
trebuchets.
Yeah.
So over the coming weeks and months, so all this time that construction on the banana plantation was going on, they uncovered no less than 300
of those
round rock spheres.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
These ranged in size from 6 inches, so that's pretty small,
pretty
in diameter, to 6 feet.
That's a big rock.
Wow.
That's several tons.
That's humongous.
But who in the world made them and why? Because they were definitely made.
Mm-hmm.
Were they like in a straight line through?
No, I don't.
They were scattered about.
They were scattered all about.
Yeah.
And that was a question that I wondered if there was some kind of
pattern to it or something.
some pattern, but I don't know that they were. These weren't archaeologists at first that were first uncovering them anyway. But archaeologists have studied these, and they're not really certain who made them. They've identified that a group of people lived in the area between 800 and 1500 AD, and they've come to be called the Dequeese. What did I say?
Dequeese.
Dequeese.
Okay.
That's how I'm going to pronounce it.
Let's go with one or the other or both.
But the Dequeese people, as they lived along the river of the name.
I was going with the Dequeese River.
The Dequeese River.
Yeah, right.
But it's unknown what they called themselves.
Yeah.
They may have been related to the Maya, who lived slightly to the north in Guatemala and southern Mexico, but even that is uncertain. Making matters more complicated, the written records of the Spanish explorers who came to the area in the 1500s make absolutely no mention of seeing any culture with large stone orbs in their village construction or decoration.
And you think if the Spanish had seen these big rocks, they would have written it down. This village has big round rocks, but they didn't write it down.
And
So it must have been before their time, I guess.
Yeah. Costa Rica experiences many volcanic eruptions, and it's likely that the giant orbs were covered by lava and other volcanic debris sometime before the Spanish came.
Yeah.
They remained covered and unknown until the backhoes started digging them up in the 1930s. Perhaps the people who built them experienced the same fate.
Yeah, they might have been wiped out by the volcanoes, too.
The stones themselves, the stones themselves are made out of the porous, igneous rock that's similar to basalt. Evidence on the stone indicates that they were sculptured by hammering boulders into crude spherical shapes using denser rocks, and were then finished by polishing the stone's surface by using sand. So they may have been super smooth. Yeah,
their pictures of them showed them being just very round, I think.
So that explains how, but why? Well, that is completely unknown. The Dequeese spheres, as they've come to be known, can be located all over the area of the Dequeese River Valley of Costa Rica. A few have been moved to the National Museum in Costa Rica's capital, San Jose, but the remainder can be located in both public and private collections, including used as yard art.
Yeah. Seeing them around. Yeah.
And to this day, no one's figured out the reason why these ancient people created so many perfectly round spheres out of native rock. The mystery may never be solved. And it makes me wonder, just throwing it out there, and it's probably been studied and pushed aside as I wonder if they're like tombstones.
Oh, right.
You know?
Round ones, yeah.
Like, and the bigger the stone, the
more important the worse.
But I'm pretty sure they would have figured that one out. This information came from, of course, Atlas Obscura and also heritagedaily.com.
I don't know. What are we going to do today? Build a round stone again? All right, let's do it.
Keep working on it. Keeps rolling away.
And now for something completely off topic and off kilter. Brace yourself for the oddity du jour.
Well, all right. For our oddity today, this year, 2023, is the 100th anniversary of one of the most iconic structures in the world. Nope, it's not the Eiffel Tower. That was built in 1887. Not the Empire State Building. We have a few more years to go until we get to that centennial. Not the Gateway Arch. That's only about 60 years old. Maybe it might help you narrow it down if I told you that this structure, in its original form, was actually an advertisement for real estate development.
See, and if I hadn't read this ahead of time, I think I might have known that. I might have been able to figure it out from that.
Any idea, Phil? You know what it is?
Well, I read the article title.
Oh, well, okay. Then no cheating then.
I cheated.
Okay, well, it's 45 feet tall and 400 feet long, and it sits on the side of a mountain in an urban park.
I was going to say on the West Coast.
Yeah,
just
on
to
the
keep
West
it
Coast.
lighter,
That's there.
so
You're
that
getting
people
closer.
keep
You're getting
guessing
down
for a while.
Of course, we're talking about the famous Hollywood sign.
Advertisement for real estate, huh?
Yes, that's right. It sits on the slope of Mount Lee in the middle of Griffith Park in Los Angeles. Built in 1923, the sign was basically a giant billboard for a new development called Hollywood Land. And yes, it originally had those extra 4 letters at the end.
That's right.
It was built for a cost of $21,000 and was intended to be a temporary structure. It was also
that went well.
It was also originally covered with about 4,000 light bulbs. There was one guy who lived in a small structure just down the slope. They actually called it a shack, He lived in the shack just down the slope, and it was his job to replace the light bulbs every day as they burned out. By the late 1940s, the sign had fallen into disrepair, and the Hollywood Land real estate development had folded up. Some said the sign should be bulldozed, but the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce stepped in and had it rebuilt, but this time without the land on the end. By the late 1970s, the sign was in bad shape again. To the rescue steps in, of all people, Hugh Hefner, the founder of the Playboy Empire. Working with the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce, Hefner threw a huge party at his famous mansion and put the guilt trip on many who had achieved terrific success in Hollywood. Quote, "I need 9 of you big shots to step up with $27,000 each, enough to rebuild each of the 9 letters in the sign." Stars like Andy Williams, Gene Autry, Alice Cooper, and the Warner Brothers all pitched in. The old sign was torn down, and 3 months later, a new one went up. Unlike the wood and sheet metal construction of the original, the new version was made of steel, mounted to steel columns, and sunk into sturdy concrete foundations. Frequent power washing keeps the sign in pristine condition. In 1986, when Pope John Paul II visited Los Angeles, one of the L's was blacked out so that the sign read, "Holywood." Those clever Angelinos. Then in 2010, Hef stepped in again. It appeared that the parcel of land immediately to the left of the H was not owned by the city as everyone had thought. In fact, it was part of the Howard Hughes estate. Hughes had bought the property way back in the 1930s, and he was going to build an enormous mansion for his fiancée, the dancing actress Ginger Rogers. I guess I didn't realize that Ginger Rogers was
I didn't
engaged
either.
to Howard Hughes. I always think of her with Fred Astaire.
Yeah, I do too.
My wife and I say that in heaven we're going to be able to dance like Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire. Anyway, the relationship fell apart, and the parcel of land became a forgotten piece of the Hughes estate until it hit the market in 2010. The mansion was never built. The city scrambled to scrape up enough money to buy the parcel and protect the view, but it came up short of their goal. Hugh Hefner stepped in and opened his checkbook and donated the remaining money to the cause.
Wait, he donated money
for them to buy
it from him.
No.
Or maybe from his estate.
No, Howard Hughes. You're confusing Howard Hughes.
Okay.
And,
Okay, yeah, I am.
Howard Hughes and Hugh Hefner. We got too many Hughes
Sorry.
here.
Howard Hughes, yeah.
It was part of the Howard Hughes estate back in the 1930s. And
got it.
Hugh Hefner, try to keep your rich billionaires in order here.
Eccentric billionaires, that's right.
Yeah, that's right. Well, the Hollywood sign appears in the background of countless tourist photos. According to Casey Schreiner, author and guidebook of, quote, Discovering Griffith Park, a local guide, quote, I'd be hard-pressed to think of a more iconic landmark. People are drawn to it because it symbolizes a dream and a kind of ambition that only exists in L.A. That's kind of a nice thought.
Mm-hmm.
But our story of the Hollywood sign, not quite complete. It does also contain a bit of a dark side.
No.
Okay, so here's the thing.
Like a shadow?
I'm very impressed because you send me the stuff and I compile it into our script or whatever. And as I'm reading through this, I'm like, oh, but there's a story.
Yeah.
Oh, but there's a story. I know. And I was going to tell it. Because I didn't think that you would include it, because you usually don't include the dark stuff.
Well, you're familiar with the song "Hooray for Hollywood," right? You've heard that every year at the Academy Awards, and as the backdrop of the whole movie industry. Well, written in 1937, this song was originally a satire.
No. Sung
from the standpoint of a young person who went to Hollywood seeking fame, but found none. It was kind of from the, hooray for Hollywood. It was kind of that was their attitude. Any office boy or shop mechanic can be a panic. That's the part of the words. Well, one of the influences of this song may have been that of a pretty young actress named Peg Entwistle. Peg was a British stage actress who began performing professionally at the age of 17. She had some success on Broadway. In fact, she had the lead in a play called The Wild Duck in 1925. Upon seeing this play, a young Betty Davis exclaimed to her mother, quote, "I want to be just like Peg Entwistle." Well, in 1932, Peg traveled to Los Angeles to appear in a play, but she was also hoping to take Hollywood by storm and make it big in the movies. But she was only offered bit parts. Distraught and disappointed with her life, on September 16, 1932, she hiked up Mount Lee, then climbed to the top of the H in the famous sign, and leapt to her death.
Oh.
Legend has it that the very next day, a letter arrived offering her the lead in a Hollywood production.
Yeah.
Now, this information came from howstuffworks.com and also from Wikipedia.
And you also said that they changed it for the Pope coming.
Yes.
They changed it to Hollywood.
Yes.
It's been changed over, and sometimes not officially.
Right.
In fact, twice, one, and I don't have these dates right in front of me. Once, I want to say it was 1976. It might have been a little bit later.
Well, the bicentennial, maybe, yeah.
Well, no.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
And once in 2007, it was changed due to some significant legislation.
Oh, really?
And it was changed to Hollyweed.
Oh.
Yeah, they blacked out certain parts of the O's and put in the crossbar to make it Hollyweed.
I see.
Yeah.
Well, all right.
But it has been changed over time for different things.
Interesting. The Hollywood sign. That's quite an artifact. It was not really an artifact, but it fits into our artifact episode today as our oddity.
And we're back.
Yay!
Dun, dun, dun.
So now back to our artifacts. This information comes from a website called zmescience.com. In 1901, a group of sponge divers exploring an ancient Roman shipwreck off the Greek island of, I think it's Antikythera, 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 came to the surface with an interesting-looking glob of metal. It appeared to have a set of gears, and there was a location for a crank handle. Portions of the original wooden box housing were still visible. The item was taken to the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, where it was studied by curators. The following year, the museum announced that this object had a series of interconnected gears, and when turned by a crank handle, it would project astronomical positions and even predict eclipses decades in advance.
Oh, wow.
The most stunning thing about this find is that the curators judged the age of the mechanism to be more than 2,000 years old. It has been described as the world's oldest known example of an analog computer. The level of craftsmanship in the ancient computer, now housed in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, is simply mind-boggling when you factor in its age. Consisting of a box with dials on the outside and a very complex assembly of gear wheels mounted within. It's about as complex as an 18th century top-notch clock, although it's over 2,000 years old. Mm-hmm. In 2008, a team from Cardiff University used computer X-ray and high-resolution scanning to image inside the parts that were encased in barnacles in order to read the inscriptions that once covered the gears and casings. According to Professor Michael Edmonds, who led the study, quote, "This device is just extraordinary. The only thing of its kind. The design is beautiful. The astronomy is exactly right. The way the mechanics are designed just make your jaw drop. Whoever had done this had done it extremely carefully, he added. In terms of historic scarcity value, I have to regard this mechanism as being more valuable than the Mona Lisa.
Oh, my goodness.
Pretty amazing. The level of sophistication utilized in the device has forced scientists to accept that their perceptions of ancient Greek engineering may be faulty.
You think?
Yeah. Nothing similar to this exists or is mentioned in any known writings from the period or its creation. For all we know, it really should not exist, but exist it does. Given its complexity, the main gear was 5 inches in diameter, in fact, and contained over 230 teeth. There were likely more models made before this one, but none have ever been found. The presence of this device on this cargo ship may indicate that it aided in navigation, but other markings suggest that it was also used to mark the timing of Olympic game events. So how did the ancient Greeks, with basically no technology available, manage to build such a complex calculator? Well, we don't know yet. It's a mystery still, but quite an amazing artifact.
So there are a lot of artifacts called OOP art, and that stands for out of place artifacts. So history, I mean, we have an idea of history.
What should happen? What should be where?
Yeah, what should be where, and what talents or technology was available at that time. But there's certain artifacts that have been found just completely out of place in the timeline.
Could be found like finding a Ford Mustang in the Old West. You know?
That's right. This is one of them. Well, most everyone is familiar with the story of King Arthur and the legend that grew up around him, pulling a mythical sword out of a stone.
Oh, I like that story.
Excalibur.
That's right, which made him king.
Right.
And, there's a lot of debate whether King Arthur actually existed.
Yes.
But the whole sword in the stone is pretty much accepted as mythology. Right. But you may not be aware that there is a real sword in a real stone that might have inspired the tale, but it's not in England. So it's not King Arthur's sword. If you travel to central Italy to the Tuscany region near the famous city of Siena, you will locate a small village of, I'm going to say this, Chiusdino.
Yeah.
And we want to thank our friend in Italy, Danila. Is it Danila?
I think it's Danila, yeah.
For helping us with that pronunciation. And if I butchered your name, you didn't tell us how to pronounce your name. But this town of Chiusdino saw the birth in 1148 of an evil and arrogant knight named Gargano Guidati. Legend has it that in 1180, Gargano was confronted by the archangel Michael himself, who urged him to renounce his evil ways. Scoffing, Gargano followed Michael to the top of a local mountain. Michael was telling Gargano that he needed to change, to which he laughed, "It would be easier for me to split boulders with my sword than to give up my worldly pleasures." To emphasize his point, Gargano drew out his sword and dashed it point first into a large nearby boulder, and to his amazement, the sword sunk deep into the stone up to its hilt.
Wow.
The miraculous occurrence caused Gargano to repent of his ways. And this sounds just as mythical as King Arthur, right?
Right.
Except the sword and the stone actually exist.
Yes.
The Catholic Church also credits Gargano with performing 19 miracles, and he was later canonized to saint status. So he is a saint. So he actually existed.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's a whole nice story and everything, but is it true? And if not, then how to explain that in Chiusdino inside Montesiepi Chapel, you will find a large stone with the handle of a sword emerging from the top. For
big
many
stone.
years,
It's like a boulder, and the stone is just, the sword's just sticking out of it. The pictures I've seen.
Yeah, we'll have a picture on Facebook too. For many years, the sword was actually considered just false, like maybe just the hilt, but recent testing has dated the sword's metal and its style to the late 1100s. And of course, this doesn't verify the myth claim, but it does put the sword in the time of Gargano's life.
Right.
And the chapel has also another interesting set of artifacts.
Another one?
It seems that the devil sent some thieves to try to pull the sword out of the stone. What is it about devil and churches?
I don't think he's very smart.
Well, they couldn't get it to budge. And while they were yanking on its handle, a pack of wolves that Gargano had befriended attacked the thieves and chewed off their arms.
Yes, that's right.
And we know this because their severed arms are also on display in the chapel. and to serve as a warning to anyone who else might try to steal that sword. And it's funny because the arms, by the way, were also tested and date back to the 1100s.
Right.
And we just covered, we covered a church
in Prague.
In Prague.
A couple of weeks ago.
Arm that was captured by Mary.
If you are worshiping in a church that doesn't have a severed arm, I mean, what are you even doing? Right?
Can you even call it a church?
Some Italian scholars.
Church ain't section. There's no arm around here.
There's no severed arm. Some Italian scholars claim that King Arthur's story in England was actually inspired by Galgano's sword, the actual sword and stone. Galgano had been celebrated in hymns and poems that would have been well known in King Arthur's time. Yeah. They even claim that the round table may have been inspired by the round shape of the chapel in which Galgano's sword lies.
Oh, it makes sense.
It's getting circular here.
Yeah.
We may never know if Galgano's sword was the inspiration behind the King Arthur story, but even if it's not, it's interesting artifact nonetheless. And this information came from, can you guess it?
Atlas Obscura.
Atlas Obscura, and from Travel Through History, and through is spelled THRU.
Oh, they were clever.
TravelThroughHistory.com.
Nice.
That's cool.
Well, now we're all familiar with the Great Pyramids of Egypt. These giant burial chambers have puzzled mankind for millennia. The largest of these is the Pyramid of the Pharaoh Khufu, is some 4,500 years old, and at 481 feet tall, was the tallest man-made structure in the world up until the construction of the Eiffel Tower in 1887. So for all that time, it was the tallest building.
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
It was thought that the pyramid complex had been thoroughly explored, as both archaeologists and tomb raiders had browsed the many passageways and crevices within the pyramid. But then in 1954, a major new discovery was made completely by accident.
If you push this one rock,
well, yeah, kind of.
Door opens.
You've watched too many movies.
Absolutely.
You say, open sesame. Yeah. From an article on goodnewsnetwork.org, we learn about an archaeologist named Kamal El-Malek, who was supervising the cleanup of an area just south of the pyramid when he happened to notice what looked like a series of marble slabs that were laid out parallel to one another. Sensing that these slabs were not likely a natural phenomenon, he began clearing the dirt and sand from off of them. In all, some 12 large slabs were laying next to one another and appeared to be covering something in a pit beneath. El-Malek drilled a hole through one of the slabs, and later he reported, quote, "I did smell history."
I'm going to get a candle that smells like that.
You might not want to. It probably wasn't smelling
ancient
all that
history.
good.
Well, let's see. Further excavation revealed a large boat had been buried next to the Great Pyramid
Cool.
and covered over by these slabs. But not just any boat. This boat was a master of craftsmanship, measuring 142 feet long, 19 feet wide, and consisting of 1,224 pieces. Each piece had been hand-carved out of cedar, which likely came from Lebanon. There are no nails or screws holding it together, but rather the pieces are cut to fit like a jigsaw puzzle. To reinforce the structure, the pieces were basically sewn into place using rope made of halfa grass, which grows in abundance along the Nile. The Khufu boat has been called the world's most important artifact. The popular boat, this particular boat was designed to take King Khufu to the afterlife. That's why it was buried next to the pyramid. But it gives archaeologists and historians tremendous insight as to how the ancient Egyptians constructed ships. 4,500 years ago, while people in the rest of the world were paddling around in dugout canoes, these people constructed amazing crafts, well capable of sailing up and down the Nile and across the Mediterranean Sea. You know, their technology was just so advanced of what anybody else in the world was doing. All of the wooden pieces looked like they had just been milled from the lumber yard. Some of the rope had deteriorated over time, but archaeologists have managed to reassemble the boat using the same halfa grass rope that was used in the original construction. Khufu's boat is now on display at the Grand Egyptian Museum in Cairo in a new facility that just was completed in 2021. So that would certainly be a great thing to go see. That
would be amazing.
Pharaoh Khufu's boat. Yeah, I've seen pictures of it, seen video of it. Just the way that they were able to dominate their whole area was demonstrated there just with their skill in woodcraft. Now, going from ancient Egypt to the modern United States. In 1957, there was this guy named Guy. His name was actually Guy Melgren. He was an amateur archaeologist who was exploring a site along the coast of Maine. He had been given permission by the landowner, a fellow named Goddard. On a ledge about 8 feet above the high tide line, Guy happened upon what looked like an ancient campsite. At a fire pit, he found among numerous stone chips what appeared to be ancient stone knives, arrowheads, and carving tools. As he carefully picked through the site, he noticed something else that appeared to be really out of place, a metal coin. From the markings on the coin, Guy thought that it was an Old English coin, perhaps as old as the 12th century. He showed the coin to a few friends and visitors as an oddity or curiosity, but he never really displayed it. Upon his death in 1978, a photo of the coin appeared in a regional newspaper along with the question, quote, "Were the English the first to visit North America?" A copy of this publication with photos of the coin made its way to London, where it was examined by a prominent coin dealer who realized that it was not an English coin. Instead, it was a Viking coin that was minted between 1065 and 1093. The question remains, how did a Viking coin get to the coast of the United States? From Atlas Obscura, we learned that this find set off quite a controversy in the archaeological community. There were many prominent archaeologists who believed that Guy actually planted the coin on the ledge.
Of course.
You see, it appears that in 1879, a large cache of 2,000 Norse coins had been found by a potato farmer in a field in Norway. The University of Oslo bought the coins from the farmer, kept the best examples for display, and then sold off the remainder. Many archaeologists suspected that Guy obtained one of these and planted it on the ledge. The idea that Vikings reached the Americas before Columbus goes back to Icelandic sagas that describe the journey west from Greenland to a lush land of grass and grapes. They called it Vinland the Good. For centuries, these were considered only stories to all except for a handful of enthusiasts, including 19th century Scandinavians who had settled in America. Fiercely proud, they relied on these stories to defend their claim to this new country, often in the face of discrimination and scorn from earlier Anglo-Saxon migrants. Other Scandinavian finds, such as the Kensington runestone, which we covered in our episode about runes in Season 2, Episode 19, have been recently debunked as fakes. But Guy Melgren, with his Scandinavian heritage, fit the profile of one who might just fake such a find. But other archaeologists pointed out that Guy never promoted the coin as being Viking. He always thought it was English. Further study showed that the Maine penny, as it has come to be called, was somewhat different from those found in the Norway potato field. Now, along this time, helping to bolster the authenticity of the find was the discovery of the ancient Viking encampment in Canada along the coast of Newfoundland. It was in the late 70s when this was also discovered. However, there's no evidence that the Vikings ever traveled further south from there, still several hundred miles northeast of Maine.
Yes, but they crossed that ocean. Why not travel just a...
But it may not have been them. I mean, there was arrowheads found and other tools and stuff. They could have traded.
And so that's what they kind of concluded. So how did the Norse coin make its way to the coast of Maine? The answer was found among the other items located on the ledge. And Phil, you got it right.
Boom!
Particularly the Native American tools. It was determined that those tools were not made of local rock.
Oh.
In fact, further examination showed that some of the arrowheads and stone knives came from as far away as the Great Lakes and Newfoundland. This ledge contained artifacts from a broad region. One archaeologist described it this way, quote, "All sorts of objects seem to be out of place in the 12th century Maine show up at this one spot, as if it were the site of some pre-Columbian World's Fair." Archaeologists have finally determined that the area of the find was a major trading center for Native Americans. Items are brought from all over to trade. It's now mostly accepted that the coin was brought to Newfoundland by the Viking explorers and then was traded hand to hand by Native Americans until it wound up in Maine. According to the Smithsonian, it is the only Viking artifact to be found in the United States.
I don't know. I'm still holding out hope that the Vikings were here.
Yeah, Maine is the only state that only has one syllable. There's your fun fact for the day.
Oh.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, I guess so.
Now you're running through all of the names.
Yeah. Well, In 1947, in Israel, a Bedouin shepherd boy, actually in 1947 it was still called Palestine, it hadn't been Israel, wasn't called Israel until the following year, a shepherd boy was looking for his lost sheep. Spying a small cave on the side of a hill, the boy thought that perhaps the sheep was in there. He decided to throw a rock into the cave to scare the sheep out, but when he threw the rock, he heard the sound of pottery shattering. Returning later with a torch, he discovered several intact clay pots, as well as the one his rock had broken. But he also discovered that the pots contained scrolls with ancient writing on them. His discovery has been characterized by the name the Dead Sea Scrolls.
That's right.
Oh, wow.
Over the next 10 years, more pottery throughout the area was discovered. In all, these scrolls contained all of the books of the Old Testament of the Bible except for the book of Ruth. But there was also another find. Hidden among the Dead Sea Scrolls was a curious roll of copper. According to an article from the University of Southern California, quote, in ancient times, the text of a document had been incised on a thin sheet of copper, which were then joined together. At the time it was found, however, the document was rolled into two separate rolls of heavily oxidized copper, which were far too brittle to unroll. For 5 years, the scholars and experts discussed ways of opening the scroll. Finally, they decided to cut the scroll into sections from the outside using a small saw. Working very carefully, they cut the scroll into 23 strips, each one curved into a half cylinder. Before it was cut, one of the scholars thought he saw the words for silver and gold, and he suggested that the scroll was a list of buried treasure. And sure enough, when it was deciphered, the scholar turned out to be right.
Cool.
The treasure described contained large amounts of gold, silver, and coins. So why isn't anybody out looking for it? Well, they are. But there's a problem. The message on the copper scroll gave very specific instructions about where the various treasures have been hidden. The problem is that they are too specific. Here's some examples. Quote, it's hidden in the gutter, which is in the bottom of the rain barrel tank. Or another one. It's in the second enclosure in the underground passage that looks east. Or here's another one. It's in the water conduit of the northern reservoir. It's unknown where these locations are, and even if they still exist. The messages are written in ancient Hebrew, which is the language of the Old Testament, but the problem is that much of the language used here is not of a religious nature, and some of the meanings are lost. You know, we understand the ancient Hebrew religious writings, but other ancient Hebrew don't know. Some have speculated that the treasure listed here came from the temple in Jerusalem sometime before that city was sacked by the Romans in 70 A.D. Others suspect that the treasure may have belonged to an ancient Jewish sect known as the Essenes, E-S-S-E-N-E-S. Still others speculate that it may have been an ancient hoax. The location of its finding alongside by the Dead Sea Scrolls is certainly odd. Who the treasure belonged to and what happened to it, we may never know. And information came from West Semitic Research Project on dornfeistusc.edu.
Yeah, so the team that brought the Dead Sea Scrolls out, put them in the caves and stuff, one guy's just like looking around. I'm just going to leave this right
here. There was more to the Dead Sea Scrolls. I know, and I don't know, I'm not a scholar on it by any means. I know that there were...
Fodder for a new episode.
Right?
The Dead Sea Scrolls are fascinating. But I know that there was some other not biblical text in there that refers to the Bible, to biblical stories and things like that. I'm kind of down the rabbit hole of Melchizedek, who is mentioned in the Bible.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's very enigmatic character.
Kind of mysterious figure mentioned in the Old Testament. Yeah.
But he was, and a lot of what we know about him is from the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Our final story today brings us to the small Caribbean nation of Belize. Belize is located just south of the Yucatan Peninsula and shares a border with Mexico, Guatemala, and Honduras. It's about the size of Massachusetts,
which is a small country.
To say it's small, that's right. Yeah. Located in the mountain highlands of Belize is the hidden Acton Tunachil Macnal, or ATM cave mouth.
Yeah, it makes it easier. The ATM.
So
the ATM, yeah.
Does it take a card? Does it have a chip reader?
This is an extensive cave system that continues for more than 2 miles. The name Acton Tunachil Macnal, which I'm sure I'm butchering, translates as Cave of the Crystal Sepulchre. It's home to some very unique wildlife, such as whip spiders, bats, large freshwater crabs, crawfish, and catfish. The entrance to the ATM cave is partially submerged in rivers and streams. In fact, to enter the cave, you've got to travel, or you have to wade up the river for more than a half a mile, and then another mile or so over dry ground takes you to large open room known as the cathedral.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
There's a lot of, in caves, whenever it opens up into a big, they call it the cathedral. Because I guess because of all of the stalactites and stalagmites making up.
Yeah.
Anyway, in the cathedral is where you will find the skeletons. Dozens of them. The skeletons range in age from 1 year old to adult.
Oh.
4 of those are infants between the ages of 1 and 3. Some are even stuffed into crevices and small adjoining caves. This site was first discovered in 1989, so fairly recently, and still remains, which to me that's 20 years ago, but I know, but it still remains difficult to access. The skeletons are believed to be from the Maya period and date to between 700 and 1000 AD, all of which show signs of suffering from blunt force trauma, unfortunately. Researchers believe that they were victims of human sacrifice, conducted by the Maya to appease their gods. Another theory is that they were witches, and leaving their skeletons in a cave,
bind them there.
Yeah, bind them there and keep them from
trapped in the cave.
From cursing other people or whatever, or roaming, so that their souls would remain trapped in the cave.
Well, hence the half-mile walk in.
True.
The longer you have to go.
But one of the skeletons, there's one notable skeleton in there called the Crystal Maiden. Ooh. It was given this name because the skeleton has actually crystallized and become affixed to the cave floor.
Yeah.
And the crystallization gives the skeleton a very sparkly appearance.
Disco skeleton.
So
wait, a petrified skeleton?
It's a crystallized skeleton.
Crystallized skeleton.
And due to its small size, diminutive size, it was believed that this skeleton belonged to a young woman, but recent testing now reveals that it's a young man, about the age of 17. And guides are now calling him the Crystal Prince. I mean, imagine for decades or for however, since 1989, being called a princess when you're actually a prince.
Dude, I'm a guy, okay?
Hello!
Ceramics found with the skeleton appear to date to the same time as their deaths. Many of these contain so-called kill holes, which were holes that would allow spirits to escape their containers.
So, they thought the soul went into the container somehow.
Yeah. Belize is not a wealthy country by any standard, and the economy is mostly dependent on agriculture and tourism. And the discovery of this cave, the ATM cave, and the crystal skeleton has really spurred the tourism income, but at a price.
Yeah.
In 2011, and see, this is why you don't touch things in museums. I'm just saying.
That's right. Yeah.
In 2011, one tourist dropped their camera on a skeleton and it crushed its skull.
Yeah.
The following year, another tourist accidentally stepped on a skull and destroyed it. As a result, cameras are no longer allowed inside the cave without permission, and this is so weird to me. Also, when visitors reach the drier part of the cave, they have to remove their shoes. Like, I don't know why they don't. I don't know. I don't know the layout or whatever, why they don't set up something where you can't get close to it. But I don't know. But anyway, the discovery of the ATM cave skeletons gives us, an intimate view of the Mayan cultures from over 1,000 years ago. And of course, Atlas Obscura.
Absolutely.
And Wikipedia.
Right. Very good.
And now it's time, boys and girls, for the Trivia Challenge.
All right, for the Trivia Challenge today, you know how this works. Like and follow our Facebook page at Remnant Stew Podcast. Like and share this episode post. Put your answer to the Trivia Challenge question in the comments of that post. The first individual to do all of that will be the winner and will be mentioned in an upcoming episode of Remnant Stew. Our Trivia Challenge is also open to school kids. So if you're a teacher, I know it's summertime, but you might be in summer school and looking for something to fill out in that long block of time, teachers. It's a great thing to do. You and your class listen to Remnant Stew. We challenge you to answer the Trivia Challenge. Send us the answer through email at staycurious@remnantstew.com. If your class is the first to answer, we will send a care package to the whole class. So what's our question today, Leah?
Okay, well, Harbin sent this one in. Off the coast of New Jersey is a particularly strange graveyard from 1850. What is it a graveyard for?
Ooh. All right,
New Jersey. Wow.
No guessing yet. Okay.
Wow.
Hey, thanks for spending some time with us. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram at Remnant Stew Podcast. You can also send us an email to say hi or suggest a topic for a future episode to staycurious@remnantstew.com. We'd love to hear from you.
Remnant Stew is a part of Rook and Raven Ventures and is created by me, Leah Lamp. Dr. Stephen Meeker and I research, write, and host each episode, along with commentary by our audio producer, Philip Sinquefield.
Hey, Bill.
Theme music is by Kevin MacLeod with voiceover by Morgan Hughes. Special thanks goes out to Brandy Nichols, Judy, Meeker, and Harbin, Gould.
Now, before you go, please hit the follow button so you won't miss an episode. Head on over to Apple Music and leave us a review. We love seeing those reviews. Share Remnant Stew with your friends, your family, and Billy the Kid if you happen to run into him. Until next time, remember to choose to be kind and always stay curious.